is like, through my life, I've been thinking about myself and also about education, because I studied, subjects related to education for a while. And I also worked at some alternative schools here and there. Like I've actually worked for a progressive school in England while I was writing my thesis on education. And it was very holistic, very sweet, small place, very, very cozy and lovely. And we also worked at Center for Learning in Bangalore, so kind of Krishnamurti school offshoot. And I studied at Rishi Valley, which is a Krishnamurti school. And the main thing I think that both Jim and I observed in these places is that the intention was very good. It was to bring up the child in a wholesome way and to educate them to be wise and all the kind of things that occur in education. But what we noticed is actually, the intention is one thing, and actually, what is the person in front of you, what is the child actually experiencing? And I think that for me was the biggest clue. And I was giving this example, like at Center for Learning, there was the school there was food cooked for everyone, and then every child had to take a little bit of every food, and they had to finish everything on their plate, right? So obviously the intention was to kind of give them nutritious food and to kind of educate them to get to like all different flavors and try things. And so the intention behind it was nice. Actually, the reality was that kids took food and some of them really couldn't eat it. They didn't like it. They didn't want to have it. Some found it hard to eat greens or whatever. But they couldn't get up until they'd finished. So sometimes kids would not even go back to their classes. They'd be sitting in one corner of the dining room, just struggling to eat it. And you could see the look on their face. They felt like there was something wrong with them, something bad, because they couldn't do this thing that was expected of people. And so I think I started noticing that actually it's our relationship with the child that is actually fundamental, and that's the most important thing. And I think if the child knows that they can trust you to understand them and to do right by them, then I think the rest goes fairly smoothly. So this is what I was starting to think in small bits. I started thinking little bits here and there. And then when I went to Brockwood as a mature student, I came across this book called The Continuum Concept. And that's about this woman from America who goes to visit an indigenous tribe in South America. She's a doctor. And while living with this tribe, she starts to really appreciate the depth of the way they parent their kids. And there was no pause, there was no praise, there was no blame. They basically trusted that a child whose needs are met will want to be social, will want to do the right thing, will want to fit in, will not be rebellious, will not try to either show off or hide themselves. They will be in a very balanced, and they will integrate with the community and wanting to contribute in a natural way. And she saw this happening, and she was very fascinated by that. And she writes this book about that. And it's a beautiful book actually, so I would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in the subject. So anyway, all this happened, and then by the time we had our children, it's not like we decided not to send them to school or to send them to school, but I think the first thing was that when you have a little baby in front of you, I think I found it very easy to see that actually whatever I did with the baby was reflected in their behavior or their response. And I think it's easy with anyone actually to see that if we're talking to someone and we're being respectful or we're being loving, you can see that in the other person, like you can feel that they're happy with it, they're relaxed with you, they're comfortable, right? So it's the same with the baby. And so what we did is we tried to put respect at the base of our behavior with the baby. So even the baby doesn't understand language, doesn't understand explanations or anything, but they do understand your intention. So we talk to them in a soft way, we explain things to them gently, like even changing a nappy, we didn't kind of just change them as if they're an object who didn't understand things. We look into their eyes, we'd say, look, I'm going to change a nappy, and sometimes they want to crawl around a bit, we let them finish that, then they come, and then we change it. So everything was done as, basically thinking that we put them first, we put our conveniences next, because basically we felt like we are the ones who can understand. We've had more experience, we have language, we have concepts, they don't have those yet, but they will have them. But in the meantime, how can we keep their lives so they feel emotionally intact? That was the thinking behind it, So sorry, no blank. Yeah, so we also we kept life very simple because we didn't want to go around telling them no, yes. We didn't want to be policemen, And so we actually made the house very simple. We put away anything that could be broken, we put away anything that was dangerous. So they were free to explore. And we spent a lot of time outside in nature actually. They did a lot of their play just, with buckets of water and mud and wooden spoons and, banging things. And we found that actually outside in nature and with just a few things, they were endlessly engaged and amused, and we didn't have to do much to kind of show them things or do anything for them actually. They were very observant also. They observed everything we did, they observed the world, and they found it fascinating. And I found it, looking through their eyes, very fascinating also. And actually when Gangu was born, he was in England. And I think one of the things that struck me was that all the other mothers around me, they were very because I had a bunch of friends who gave birth at the same time. And they were very much trying to teach the child something very early on. They were pointing at the ear and nose and tree and bird, and they were doing all this stuff. And then I looked at Gangu, and he was this bright-faced little baby. He was looking at everything without words. And I was thinking, words are going to come in, and they will come later. So why don't I just be with him rather than start teaching immediately? So, and we had some lovely walks. In Devon, it's very beautiful actually. So we had these walks without any words. Just he was watching things, and I would also watch with fresh eyes, almost seeing through his eyes. And sometimes I would sing a song, or but it was just I felt very beautiful. The kind of presence of a child is very. I found it very compelling actually, and I felt why don't I intrude into this with all my knowledge and words and stuff? So I never did that actually. And then the thing is, as they grow older, they start to understand language. They start to copy you. So I think for me, in some ways, I read lots about spirituality and being this and being that and stuff. And actually, when my first child came, I realized that actually I can't put off being the kind of person I want to be for another time, because whatever I was doing is reflected in the child right away. So I had to be the person I wanted. Whatever I hoped for the child, I had to be that now. And so that kind of made my kind of journey towards being a coherent person come much quicker, I think. Because I was, I no longer was doing it just for myself. I was doing it for another human being who I felt very responsible for. So, I think the values that we have, being really honest, being genuine, being patient, being kind, being generous, all these qualities, I felt they came much more easily and naturally, because my focus was I'm here for this person, I'm here to teach this little person what to do, kind of thing, how to live. And so it wasn't just about accepting them, it was also about accepting everyone else around me. So with all my family, with the vegetable guy, with the chokidar, whoever, you have to be generous and accepting of everyone. You can't just accept your child, because that doesn't really work. So I think, and also Jim and I, through parenting, we had a lot of chats about things, and we both wanted to see what was true and what was best for the child. So I think our relationship had come together based on seeing what was true. So and I think one of the things we really did is we led a very slow life. We spent a lot of time in nature. We lived in places away from cities, and we rented a small place. We didn't use a lot of money, because we wanted to keep our lives simple. We didn't want to work a lot, because we felt actually what happens is most of us come from a different conditioning of how we were parented, right? So if we want to see actually what could be different, what could make sense, we'd have to have a little gap, little time between our automatic response or reaction that pops up, and to see actually, what are we trying to do with the child? Does it make sense? Is it respectful? Is it kind? What will the impact be on the child? So I think these questions were always there in our mind, and by having a slightly slower life, we had time for their questions, for our reactions to come up, and to have a little space before we kind of reacted or responded from there. So for me, I found it very interesting to see that actually a lot of the things we kind of think are obvious to children, or what I'd heard is obvious, you have the tantrums and the terrible twos and the fiery paws and the traumatic teens, all these things which are kind of given as, it's almost like inherent stages of life of a child growing up, and who need to rebel to kind of find their identity and stuff like that. We didn't find that actually. We found that actually if we respected the child, then they didn't have a need to react or to be, make tantrums or anything, because actually we realized we could meet their needs with kindness, and I think meeting their needs doesn't mean they could do whatever they wanted. But say for example, a child is small and they're trying to tear a book because they're enjoying the the sound of the paper or the feel of it. So we would kindly take the book away and say, no, you can't tear this book, but here's some newspaper, you could tear this instead, you know. So basically saying that, okay, you can't do this, but we understand your need. We understand what you would like, and we're trying to find a way to also meet your need. You know, or if they want to play with water inside, we let them play with the water outside. So we didn't just stop what they want to do, but we would understand what's coming, what's behind that, and try and explain and meet their needs some other way. And I mean, we felt it worked really well. We felt like and because we weren't trying to control them, we weren't trying to manipulate them, we felt as they grew, they really trusted that we were on their side. And when they felt we were on their side, if we said something is really important, they really took notice actually, because they knew that we aren't just trying to use our power over them, we're not trying to boss them around, we're not trying to control them in a way that isn't necessary for the situation. It wasn't just my whim, like my preference over your preference. It's not a battle. There's a reason for everything why we should do something, you know. So that always came through explanations. And we told them, that you don't need to obey us like blindly. But if we make a request and it doesn't make sense to you, like please just tell us why not. Like what, and if you have a better idea, then come up with that and tell us that. So, and many times they would say, you know, Mama, you're saying this, but actually, have you seen this would make more sense? And it did make more sense, and we would go with that, you know. So it was almost like we were 4 friends living together with different levels of information, but with a kind of feeling for each other's needs and wanting to meet each other's needs, you know. So even if we had a need, we would request it. We would say, like, you know, can you be quiet for half an hour because I'm very tired, I need to sleep? Or, you know, could someone please help me with some dishes, you know? And we found that when we asked for things like that, they would really, like, very happily and generously help, you know. But I think if we ever made the mistake of actually complaining about it, like, you know, no one is quiet in the house, or, you know, no one helps me with work, or saying to someone, then they're already on the defensive. Whereas if we make a request saying, this is my need, then actually most people, if they care about you, want to help meet your need. So that's another thing we found. So, I mean, so there's this fear that actually if we don't send our kids to school or we don't teach them something, they won't learn. And actually, like, we found that it wasn't true. Like, even reading, they used to sit on our lap and would read the stories with them. And at some point, Gangu started like recognizing the names of people, the characters, you know, Anne and George and Timothy and stuff. And he started pointing to those. And then later he started recognizing the names of the small on, at, of, the, you know, because they also repeated more often. And suddenly, like, in his own way, he found a system of reading, and he started reading, you know. And at that point, Zag came to us and said, you know, Mama, I never want to learn to read. You know? So I said, that's fine. I don't need you to learn to read, and you don't have to. You know? And I said, if at any point it makes sense to you, you feel it's useful, you feel it's interesting, then you can do it. If you don't want to, that's fine with me. I don't need you to learn to read. You know? And you could see his body language that he's like satisfied. That, you know, maybe he had this feeling that, oh, you know, are they expecting my brother's learning? So do they love him more? Do they, you know, are they more proud of him? He had these in his head. I don't know, but felt like he really relaxed when he heard this answer, that there was no pressure on him to read. And then, you know, within a few months, a month or two or something, he'd learned to read from Gangu. You know, they kind of sit around books and do whatever. I don't know what they did, but so it feels like all through life, actually, whatever they've been interested in, they play with that and they learn. Like they learned, you know, play guitar and piano and chess. They learned to play chess a lot because they're very enthusiastic about it. You know, whether it's climbing trees or cooking. And so I feel like actually our intelligence is there, and I don't feel like, oh, you know, my kids are some special things. I feel actually all of us have that. And I think if we're trusted to learn, you can learn, and you can learn very fast when the attention comes. And you know, they never learned to learn actually. They were just playing with whatever they were engaged with, and learning sort of happened as a byproduct actually. So we exposed them to things that were in our lives through travel, through, you know, Jim would play chess, I would read, whatever we were doing. You know, I would do yoga at one point because I wanted to, and they would sometimes do their made-up yoga exercises on the side. You know, so it's like they were just playing with everything, and we never put any pressure on them to say like you must learn this or you should learn that, or we never said we're proud of you. Basically, we also didn't use like praise and blame and punishment. Like, I think punishment and blame is something that most people will just accept that doesn't make any sense. But even praise is basically it can become an oppressive thing, because when someone praises you, you become addicted to the praise. And what I notice is that when children are very young, they're so absorbed in what they're doing. They're making a sand castle, or they're trying to balance some blocks, and they're totally involved in the activity. And there's no feeling like who's watching me, who thinks this is good, who thinks this is bad. There's no feeling of that. But what happens is mostly we interfere. We say, oh, look, what a high tower you've made, or what a beautiful painting, or look how you've learned to walk. So when we start evaluating what they're doing, in terms of also like whether we're pleased with it or not, then they become hooked to that praise and to that validation. And in fact, I feel like there's one thing that most of us are victims of, that I've noticed in our lives, is kind of become so psychologically, emotionally beggared. We go around trying to seek validation, and when we don't get that validation, we don't feel like experience is complete. And I felt like that's one thing I didn't want them to have, is that burden. So we really didn't evaluate or praise anything. And like even if they came, people sometimes ask, like, if you don't evaluate, you don't praise, then how do children get feedback? So what we said is like, actually there's so many ways to give feedback without evaluating, but we are not used to it because that's not the culture we grew up in. So, if a child brings you a painting to show, then you can also ask questions like, what gave you the idea to do this, or what's happening in the picture, or you engage with the picture, or if they're showing you something, if they're showing you music they're playing, you can say, I'm enjoying listening to you play. It's not like, oh, you're playing well, or you're playing badly, or it's just like, how your friend showed you something, you appreciate it, or you just be like interested, you give your attention to it, and that is very fulfilling actually. Because the person knows if you're interested in them, and you're not interested in them only if they do a certain thing or achieve a certain thing. And I feel that is a very, I feel actually that's what we also want in our life. When we want someone to listen to us, we want to listen to them because they care about us, not because like we're good or we're bad. And so that's another thing we did, and I think that it worked really well. And actually, some years later, when they heard other kids' parents saying, we're proud of you, sometimes come and say like, are you proud of us? So we just thought that actually, we want you to enjoy what you're doing and do it because it's meaningful or because it's helpful to another person or whatever your reasons of doing it. And we appreciate whatever you're doing because we enjoy seeing you learn through life and, meet your learning needs or meet your interests. We don't need to be proud of you. Like, we love you, and we want the best for you. So I hope you guys understood that.
Not just that we had all this kind of observation, but we weren't getting. Okay, I can say this much. So my family, for instance, obviously didn't think like this at all, and even the whole idea of co-sleeping with the baby was, very alien to them. So they had this phrase like, you're just making a rod for your own back by having the baby in bed with you. And I know in India it's much more common, but in the UK it's completely not common. And we were in the UK when Gangu was born. And but actually it seemed like it works really well because, you probably all know, as soon as the baby wakes up, he can feed, and then he goes back to sleep very quickly, whereas if he's in another room or just even in a cot, he has to cry to wake you up, and the whole night is disturbed. So just simple things like that. But my family were just completely not understanding what we were doing and why we were doing it. And at some point we came across this book by Naomi Oldort. It's called Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. And actually, because we've had so many conversations also, we felt that maybe we should document our thoughts and our journey, because it seemed very sane, but it seemed very unusual. But then we came across this book which basically was saying everything that we were thinking. So we were super relieved also. I didn't have to write a book. And somebody had already done a marvelous job. Actually, it's another fantastic book.
Beautiful book, yeah. And she has lots of articles online as well written, and they're very beautifully written, very beautifully articulated. So they're worth visiting if anyone's interested in something.
So we can put those links on the group. You can find them.
I think one of the things I noticed when I was a child, I remember from being a child, is actually even if the adult wants to teach you something and means well for you, the way they tell you something often doesn't feel very good. They correct you in a certain way, and instead of feeling like, wow, I learned something wonderful, you actually feel a little bit like there's something wrong with you, you're a little less than, you feel a bit embarrassed, you feel a bit sheepish, you feel misunderstood. And so I think that feeling of, remembering that feeling made a big impact on how I was with the kids, because I would know immediately like what I'm going to do to them, this is how it's going to feel for them, because I remembered how it was to be on the other side. So I think that really helped me to, in my relationship with them. I think another thing we kind of did is which I also got from the continuum concept, is we respected their emotional expression of whatever is happening, and so even if they got hurt or they were crying or they were upset about something, we would allow them to feel what they felt without distracting them, without exaggerating it. Oh no, what happened to you? Poor you, that's terrible or something, or without underplaying it. Also saying, oh, kuch nahi hua, nothing happened, it's fine, you'll be better, or be brave, be a good girl, brave. But we didn't do any of that stuff. We just, if they wanted to cry, we let them cry. If they wanted to not cry, we let them not cry. And we were always available for a cuddle if they wanted one, but we didn't impose. Even a cuddle wasn't imposed. So I think I think the feeling that they got was that whatever we're feeling is fine to feel, and then when the charge of the feeling goes, then some clarity comes from there. But I think often if we thwart an emotional expression, because when the emotion is happening, when you're clouded by an emotion, you can't think straight. And so if you try and intervene with that, like actually what we do is when kids get hurt, often we say like, what happened, or why were you climbing there, why did you do this, you shouldn't have gone there, I told you not. So all these things are not, you can't hear them when you're emotionally charged. So in fact, those things don't make sense. And if you want to even say something later or express something later, it makes more sense to do it once they're calm and happy and relaxed again. So I think that really worked well. Like the children became very relaxed very quickly because we would just be with them and we'd offer a cuddle. But sometimes when they were in pain, they just wanted to be quiet with the pain, and they didn't even want to be touched. And that was something we respected as well. So I feel that a lot of reasons why we actually distract ourselves from negative emotions is because we weren't allowed to feel them. And when like I say I'm crying when I'm a child, I can see the people around me are not comfortable with it. They're feeling like, or they try and give me something to eat, or they show me a bird, or try and distract me. So basically the message that comes through is actually some feelings aren't so great to feel, and they make the people around us who we love also uncomfortable. And so it's better not to have those feelings. So then I think as we get older, we also use the same kind of tactics. We overeat, or we watch a movie, or we distract ourselves. We never get to feel them. We never get to learn from them actually what's going on. So I think we didn't want to do that, and so we allowed them to just feel. And actually, I found that something very healing for me as well. Like being with a baby who's crying and not trying to distract himself was very powerful. Like this little child who's tiny, doesn't know anything, isn't trying to distract himself. So actually distracting ourselves from emotions that are so-called being labeled negative is a mechanism we've learned. It's not inherent in us. It's not inherent that obviously we would try to distract ourselves. And so that was a very powerful learning for me, actually, just watching them. And actually, like in Krishnamurti, I read sometimes that, actually, like, if you have something, you have to watch it. If you have jealousy or you have pain or anger, like, be interested in it, watch it, and explore where it's coming from. And I actually felt like, the way we've been taught to suppress or to distract ourselves from those, don't allow us this thing to actually watch or to explore what's going on, because all these things are a sign of something that, we either haven't figured out, or isn't working well, or we're not being treated in the way we need to, or some need is not being fulfilled. So what is that need? What is that? What is the meaning behind this emotion? Where is it coming from? And that we don't get a chance to explore because we're already too busy trying to hide it away or cover it up, or feeling bad about ourselves. We feel these emotions. So I think that was another very powerful thing that I noticed, which actually then I noticed in like general parenting is very common, because that's what we grew up with. That's what is done to us, and so we obviously do it because that's what we know. And I can see that the impact of that when kids are not treated, when they're not accepted for whatever they're feeling or whatever they're being, it doesn't feel nice actually. I mean, as it doesn't for any of us. Actually, we want to feel accepted. We want to be understood. Why are we going through this? What's happening to us? Not that something. This is not acceptable in you. We don't like this in you. So I think that's another kind of aspect of respect. Like, respect is to actually understand the person, where they're coming from, and to be able to meet them there.
Pashwa, can you elaborate on the line that you mentioned, that not just accepting them but accepting everybody? You started with that when the child was born. You said not only, I just wanted to understand, you said one line, not...
So when you're behaving with people, it's like you can't be really nice to your child, but then they'll be rude to your vegetable vendor or something, right? It shows that you're not actually being honest. Right? When you're being with a child, the child now doesn't really know, is your niceness just contrived or is it real? Are you really actually respectful to this person, or is this just a contrived thing? So actually by treating the child really well, you realize actually I have to treat everybody really well. You can't differentiate between the two. They aren't the in group and the out group, right? So that's also a really interesting thing, because you've got this you've got this super learner in your space, right? And everything you do, they want to emulate. So you can't give them if you have any kind of awareness of it, you don't want to teach them bad habits, right? You don't want to misguide them. So in that process, you realize, actually, I have to become very consistent in myself.
I have 2 questions. So, what if they don't eat the lunch and they're saying, I just want to eat some sweets or anything like that? What do you do?
So we avoided having any junk in the house. So we had 0 junk in the house. 0. So actually, we would just, when they were very small, obviously they were just breastfeeding, so that was not an issue. But once they got older, we would just give them very simple food. And the thing was, because we also were careful in the sense that we realized that often family, well-meaning uncles, aunts, grandparents, they think it's treating, to give junk food, right? It's such a common thing everywhere that grandparents, aunts, uncles, they want to give junk food, and we were really keen not to have that in our circle. So partly we lived this strange life in that we just went to the mountains, or we went to the beach, or because I was working online and we could be anywhere. So we kept ourselves away from those situations. So whilst they were growing up, they actually got used to a very simple diet, and they didn't know anything else. If they were hungry, we gave them the food that was ready, but also we never made them eat. We never once said, it's mealtime, you have to eat, or you must be hungry, eat. We never, ever, ever made them eat. But if they were hungry, we would feed them. So that also creates a totally different relationship with food. When you're forced to eat something and you're not hungry, it creates a very strange relationship to food. So for a very long time, we never, ever, they didn't see junk food until quite recently, actually.
And the second question, most of the babies wake up at 3 a.m. in the night and starts crying for some reason and that we don't know. So what do you do at that time?
And start doing what?
Crying for some reason.
Actually, mostly they are crying. They're always crying for a reason.
Yeah.
It's just like we have to know what the reason is. So and actually the thing is quite interesting, because when you're with the baby, you actually get to, it's almost like their cries are different for different things, and you get to actually know what their cry is, So after a little while, I knew when they were crying because their nappy was dirty, or because they were hungry, or because they were too fidgety because they couldn't get comfortable or something. They had a pain in their stomach or whatever it was, So I would do whatever they needed. I may pick them up and walk a little bit, or Jim would walk with them, or I'd breastfeed them, or I would just cuddle them to sleep. Sometimes they'd had, actually Zag at one point was getting some nightmares. I think he was getting nightmares at some point because of some sort, or confused dreams at least, and he would get up, and I think the thing is he couldn't tell the difference between when he was in the dream or when he was out of the dream. And so he'd wake up from the dream and ask me questions which were from the dream, and I couldn't answer the questions. He'd say like, where's the spoon, or something random like that, and I couldn't answer it. Whatever I said, he said, no, that's not it, And if I said I didn't know, that also wasn't acceptable. So it was I was very confused what to do. And this went on for a little while, like several months, and suddenly one day he woke up and as if he had this epiphany. He said, Mama, he said, I know the difference between when I'm dreaming and I'm awake. And I was like, oh, what a relief.
This was just only in the middle of the night, not during the day.
Not during the day. Yeah. He wasn't. But I think the children also regularize their sleep quite soon. In the beginning, it's a little bit, inconvenient because your nights are broken and you're a bit tired. But I think if you're focused, like my focus at least was like, actually I wanted to do the best for the child. So then if I was a bit sleepy, it was okay. Like Jim would maybe take care of some more stuff in the day, or we would, the house wasn't swept for a couple of days. It was okay. Like we wanted to give them the priority because they wouldn't understand waiting or neglect. So we kind of gave them the priority, and then making a house beautiful came later, if at all.
If at all.
And in a way, that's partly why we didn't show them films and stuff when they were young, because I feel like films are very polarizing. There's always a goodie and a baddie, and there's music to tell you who's right and who's wrong and who you should emotionally identify with, or And I really didn't like that. So I think later on in life we try and understand people and say, oh, everyone's got a story and there's reason and stuff. But actually, the culture teaches us that actually somebody is good and somebody is bad, and we should side with one. And I just didn't want to teach them that. So you're 3?
No, not because of that. You continue for 2 minutes.
So, yeah, that was one of the things. We just wanted to feel that everyone is worthy of understanding. And I think because we accepted them, they were also very accepting as children. They also played in the village with village kids and with city kids and things. And they actually found a way to make friends very easily. Because I think they also weren't even trying to fit in. They were just being themselves. And I think as one of them said to me some months ago, actually, that actually they feel they make friends very easily because actually people like genuineness. They notice that actually people, if you're genuine, then there's something very compelling about it. People feel relaxed, secure, happy around you. So I think that was their power, that they were just not trying to, show like who they were in some certain light. They would just be who they are, and I think that was kind of a advantage. So yeah, even in cities, growing up in the buildings and stuff, they would play with kids, of all kinds.
I want to ask, how have you handled yourself when you were pregnant of something? And he has gone somewhere, nearly or whatever will happen with him. So how have you handled your
Because I generally
How have you handled if you've been scared, if you've been frightened of them being in a dangerous situation or something? I mean, actually, this continuum concept book actually was quite an eye-opener. They actually let their children play with machetes. They let their children play with bows and arrows, real bows and arrows.
or sit at the edge of a cliff even.
Yeah. So they realize actually the child has an instinctive self-preservation, and also because the child had always been trusted. The child was able to trust themselves. So because not often parents kind of police and tell you can't do that, you can do this, then the child loses the sense of what they actually can do. And they're now kind of taking their cues from what the adult's telling them they can and can't do. So in the continuum concept, they were very clearly saying that the child actually has its own innate intelligence, and if you let them be, they will actually figure things out.
But there were instances where I couldn't get over my own fear, but I still didn't impose it on them. Like when they were learning to climb trees, for example, I wasn't comfortable seeing this tiny thing right up a tree. So I would say, like, look, I'm sure you can climb a tree. I'm sure you know what you're doing, but I'm not able to watch you right now. So let your father can be with you while you're climbing the tree, and I just won't. But I didn't tell them not to climb the tree because I couldn't,
Cope.
take it. Huh? Couldn't cope. Yeah. So I think that's also one way you could. Do you have a specific example of like what kind of fear?
No.
Okay, just like.
I have a question. The food rhythm thing, I'm just curious because at places like this there are specific times of meals. So how has that happened over the years? Has that kind of stabilized? Because you mentioned earlier like the sleep rhythm is not regularized, and did the meal rhythm also? I'm just curious about that.
I think it does regularize over time. Like when babies are very young, they kind of have a different erratic rhythm. And also with them, like they realize that, okay, if we were traveling by train, or if we actually there's a situation which is external to just our preference over theirs, then they can adjust, and they do adjust, I think. And the thing is, if let's say they weren't hungry at a meal, they didn't eat. We were never worried that they will starve or they will get undernourished. We trusted that they will not starve, and so it never became also a psychological, emotional issue, which some kids do. Like then they get upset with their parents, they'll withhold eating or withhold going to the loo. People can also turn these things where they know the parent is very concerned about something. There's a relationship that goes funny. They can use that to to manipulate the parents' emotions, you know. Whereas we weren't doing that, so they couldn't and they didn't.
Another question, since I came late, I am assuming that you got introduced to this philosophy, Jeevan Vidya, few years ago. But Gangu and both of them were born earlier. Did you use any philosophy earlier, or what were the guiding principles that you used in your parenting?
Actually, she spoke a lot about that actually. So maybe if you watch the video.
Well, then I'll hear them.
Last, I would like to hear both of them.
Actually, yeah. So
No, go ahead. Please.
no, I was just going to say it was interesting when they were very young. People would maybe, like, one thing we've never done with them is make them perform, for example, right? So this was Pashwa's idea. So, you know, some people had asked Pashwa about their parenting journey. So Pashwa's decided to sit here, and I've agreed to join in, but they haven't agreed. So, I mean, you can ask them, but they aren't automatically a part of this. So, but I mean, I'm not trying to. Yeah, I
No,
don't.
just if you want to share.
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe one thing, just about the school thing. I find lots of people, I ask so many friends in Oregon, do you like school? And they're like, yeah, I'm really happy, I hate everything else in school, and I don't feel like I learned anything. But the only reason I like school is because I have friends, and I don't think I'd be able to have friends otherwise. So I was thinking, wow, I never ever had a problem with friends, with not having friends, even though I didn't go to school. And I think, so I was just finding that one thing was very interesting. Another thing is that because we didn't go to school, me and Gangu became super close in the fact that other siblings have to go to different grades, they have different friends, they hang out with different people, and they actually become like different. They never really have that same connection anymore. And but we'd stay at home, we'd make up games to each other, play little games with our little toys and pretend like we were talking to each other. We'd make up ball games together. So we had a really amazing relationship. So also then when we went and made other friends, and then we felt like there was someone was doing something that we didn't like, we'd always consult each other. So we always had like a backup always walking with us basically. And I really liked that.
Add a little bit about the people who say that they love school. Is that they always be like, oh, I love school, or I learned a lot, and it's very useful and everything. And they'd say all that, but then like 2-3 days later, someone would be like, oh, this is Monday tomorrow, oh shoot, oh, I hate school, why don't I go to school? You guys are so lucky. And I just thought, wow, this wasn't there 2 days ago, you just said something completely different. But it feels like when asked, they almost defend the school, they kind of, because they're defending the school, who's kind of defending themselves. But then later, when they're not asked or trying to make anything like, oh, they don't have to say they love school, they're like, oh, I hate school, you guys are lucky. Yeah, I wish I didn't go to school too, I wish I had more time to do something else. And also, I think we were very lucky because we grew up with parents who really cared about us and did everything they could that was best for us. And actually, that's the main part, because even if they did something that we didn't like or that we didn't want, if we knew that they were actually wanting to do what was good for us, that intent is very strong, I think. And even if we were very small, I think we still understand that they wanted to do the best for us. So I think we were very lucky with that. Then we didn't go to school, but we still made a lot of friends and we still had a lot of conversations. It's not like if you don't go to school, you don't learn. It's just that you don't learn in the way the school teaches you. You sort of learn everything they teach you, and you can learn whatever else you want to learn besides. And I also think that, so with having amazing parents and not going to school, we also then got introduced to Jeevan Vidya philosophy, and I'm really enjoying this. And I think even if I do eventually hit some amazing state of understanding, there's never going to be a reason not to come back here and talk a bit more and have conversations with people again and just discuss it, because this is like, it's the state you can't get tired of. You're not going to be like, oh, now I've had enough harmony and I'd like to do something else. So I think we're very lucky in ways that we've had so many opportunities, and it's not like opportunities mean going on yachts and etc. But it's actually, we've had so many rare chances which I don't think so many people have had. Like, I have not met many people who have not gone to school. I have not met many people who have heard of Jeevan Vidya. So I think we're very lucky that we've got so many amazing things in a sequence, and we can't ask for much more.
The thing I was going to say was, like, when they were younger, for instance, a lot of people feel like babies or young children can just be passed around like a cuddly toy, and then they were very clear that they didn't want that. So we always said, so if someone would say, can I pick him up? We'd always say, ask him. It's not like it's not for us to decide, it's for him to decide. So if they ask and you get a no, then you have to respect that no. So if you say, can I give you a cuddle? And the child says no, that's the way it is. But I think so many children are passed around like they're an object. And
we didn't pull their cheeks. We didn't even grab a kiss or grab a cuddle, actually. And interestingly, somewhere along the road, I read also this thing about actually a lot of children who actually are victims of abuse, actually because they've been manhandled, and so they feel like actually somebody else knows better what's okay for my body rather than me. Like that becomes the kind of unconscious belief. And so when someone does something which doesn't feel nice, they don't say, because they're not aware. Like these guys will always know when something doesn't feel right. They're like fine to say it doesn't feel right. But so I think that's kind of another protection. I mean, I'm not saying just for that, but it's.
It just reminds me when we were we used to stay in Goa in the winters, and of course there's a lot of people, a lot of traffic of different people, and they were very cute, and people would come up and they'd want to do this thing, and I'd always tell them or try to stop or tell no. But sometimes they would still reach in, and so actually I started reaching up and doing this to the adults, and they'd say, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "What were you about to do?" And they said, "Yeah, but they're just a child." I said, how can just a child mean you can do what you like to them, and now you're an adult, I can't do what I like to you? It's like, it just makes no sense. So I would do that sort of thing with people also. So,
How did you do it once?
I remember doing it a few times. And I think we just treat children like objects, actually. We often treat them like objects, and we don't, I think one of the main thing is we don't treat them as, see, a baby is a baby is a baby. It's a fully fledged baby. It's not a kind of something that isn't quite complete yet. And so when it's a toddler. It's not an incomplete teenager, right? It's actually a toddler. It's a perfectly formed toddler. And so we were never trying to, we never felt that they were less than just because they were small. So then in that way, I think you treat them with respect. You treat them in the same way that you would treat your partner, or you'll treat your best friend, or you'd treat any other person. You treat them with respect, because actually, okay, they're small, and they're small enough to pick up and do something with, but actually, you wouldn't just pick up and do something to a stranger or to a friend or something without asking permission. So you need to ask permission at every stage, actually. So. And I think that's one of the things that we see very little of with children, is like, we don't ask their permission, we treat them. Can I share the thing that we just talked about today? So your daughter came up with these plants, and at lunchtime, and Ashok spoke to her in a very exaggerated way, because she's small. No? And this is a very common thing amongst people, it's like, I won't talk to you in this exaggerated way, right? In a slightly babyish way, or in a kind of an extra excited kind of way. And so we never did this with the boys, and we saw actually that had an impact also by not doing that. So it's quite clear in my mind that isn't a useful thing to do. So when Ashok did it, I asked him, do you think this is it a good idea to speak to a youngster in an exaggerated way? But because we have this relationship, this friendship, and we both know that we want the good, he trusts me also to not just be trying to be a problem with him. I'm actually asking him for good reasons. And so I think, I don't know where I want to go with this. It's just like, that's also an interesting thing. We often don't feel that we can talk to people about all the subjects, because there are we're very private, or we don't like to be questioned, we don't like to be challenged. So I'd love to live in a society where we could actually, if we see something that doesn't quite make sense to us, can we find ways to talk to each other about those? And say, look, actually, that doesn't quite sit well with me. Can we talk about it? Is that such a good idea? So, I just felt really happy that I was sitting next to you, and you were the one who did it, and I was able to speak to you, and I felt very enlivened by it, actually. It kind of opens up a dialogue where we can talk about. But I think this course is also doing this, as we've come together, we're kind of looking at, actually, how do we want to live together, and what makes sense? So I think it's just an extension of that, basically. So that's probably a good place to start.
Last time you had mentioned that thing about the honored guest. I thought that was very Nice.
No, we sometimes tell, like, say these kind of things that actually, if you want to use a guide, like, treat your child like you treat an honored guest, you know, who's coming to your house, someone who you love and respect, and you don't doubt their intentions. And you know, so if an honored guest, say, drops a glass and breaks it, and the water spilled everywhere, you will say, don't worry, you know, that's fine, accidents happen, let me help you clean it and stuff. You know, you won't say like, oh, you should be holding it more carefully, or you know, you clean up the mess, because you know, you won't try to teach them a lesson. You won't distrust them. You will, you know. So actually, when you treat your friend like that, the friend basically knows that, okay, I've made a mistake, I've had an accident, but it wasn't intention, and my friend knows that that was not my intention. They trust me, they're still on my side, they still care about me. There's no love lost. But with a child, you kind of give your tone of voice becomes different. It's like, you know, you need to, you know, kind of separate yourself a little bit, you know, teach them something. So that already feels very awful. It's like, you know, someone's, like, the love has been withdrawn a little bit, and that doesn't feel nice. So we think we're teaching them a lesson so they don't do it again, but actually it's as true of the child as it is of the guest, that they weren't trying to drop the glass. And they made a mistake just like all of us make, you know. But we don't give children that respect as we give people, you know, give each other, basically.
And just to take a little bit of gloss off of it, I only grew up in a family which shouted or hit if I did something like dropping a glass. And so I know that sometimes the reaction in me is actually a reaction, you know, it's not, I won't necessarily do this honoured guest thing. And but actually my intention is I would like to. So actually I think one of the things I've really learned with this is if I do react, if I speak badly, if I speak harshly, if I speak impatiently, once I've come back down to some kind of equilibrium again, I actually always want to go and apologize. Because it's like, I actually don't want to speak to you like this. I don't want to be rude to you. I don't want to do any of these things. So actually, you know, forgive me. And actually the beautiful thing is, because I mean it, they also feel that, and they also forgive me. So like I trip up often actually. It's not like I almost never trip up. But actually they always forgive me. And so the relationship is still very beautiful.
I have a question. So what if the baby wants to play with a knife or do something dangerous?
So we always kept the house very safe. So
even in the kitchen?
But we wouldn't leave, they're on the floor, right? So that we wouldn't put anything in a dangerous position. So, but we would let them bang with pots and pans and spoons and all those things. They could do those things.
Actually in Himachal, they were chopping with sharp knives. Actually, we would be
when they were a
cutting.
little older.
No, they
She
weren't.
said baby.
Not baby, but like when Zag was 2
Mm.
and Gangu was like 3.5, and they were cutting vegetables with sharp knives and everything, you know, cabbage, and they would eat half the food we'd eaten raw.
Most of it wouldn't go in the pan.
And people would tell me, like, how can you let them cut with the thing? But actually, they didn't cut their fingers because they were doing very slowly, carefully, and I was the one who was cutting my finger because I was doing it fast, you know. So I think kids are careful, and I mean, also you're watching them, and you can also kind of assess their capacity to do something, and so you can factor that in also. Okay. Thank you.
This last thing, is clapping allowed in this thing? Thank you.
One thing I want to say, a lot of things they have said about they did this and they did that. The important point is the value behind it.
Yeah.
Action, if you copy, it will never deliver the same thing. It is the intent and the value behind it which has to be valued.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is not a prescription for this is how you should do it. This is just what we did, and this is what we thought about. So that's all. It's just a sharing of that.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.